Welcome to the Because Crack is Illegal podcast. I am Rayma Mariello, the host. I am feeling better, unmedicated, and hopefully this conversation is a little more coherent this week. I wanted to talk about grace today. And grace is one of those topics that can be hard to wrap our minds around because it is so simple. And everything that we have been taught about life, working hard for what we have, is completely counter to this concept of grace. I remember a couple months ago, we were driving to church and my second born child, Asher, this kid is such a good kid. He's such a gentle child. But he had done something, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what it was that he did, where I must have told him not to do something, and he did it anyway. So I grounded him on the way to church. I was like, you're not playing with your friends when we get home. You are not doing anything. You are going to sit in your room. You are grounded. And he cried all the way to church, which makes you feel like a horrible parent. But I was like, no, I said I was going to punish him. And that's what I'm going to do. He can't know that I am a weak parent. He is not going to walk all over me. This child is grounded. So all the way to church, he would cry. And then maybe while he was crying, he was processing, how can I make this better? How can I fix this? And he would be like, Mom, I am sorry. I will never do it again. I'm like, no, I told you what to do. You decided to go against what I told you not to do. And this is your consequence. And then he would cry some more. And at church on Sundays, I'll service produce, and he'll sit next to me on the front row. And he would lean over to me during service and whisper like a kid whispers, which is basically talking in a raspy voice, how he can fix it, what he's going to do to get out of being grounded. I'm like, no, stop talking so loud. The talking low in between your teeth while you still have a smile on your face, like that public face where you are still disciplining your child. That's what I was doing because I didn't want to look crazy in front of people at church. And during the closing song, he loves Jesus, he loves worship, and he had his little hands in the air and worshiping the Lord. And after he's done, he walks over to me, and usually at this point he goes to the youth room because they have youth the third service. And I was like, you can go to class now. He goes, no, I wanted to say something. And I was like, man, he must have had an encounter with the Lord during worship that I am unaware of. And he goes, I will wash your car when we get home so that I will do my time. He said, do my time, like he's in jail, so that I can go play. And I looked at him. I was like, Asher, you are grounded. There is nothing you can do that's going to get you out of this. And then he dropped his little head and he walked away. And during third service, he wasn't sitting next to me. He was in his youth room. I heard God whisper to my soul, teach him about grace in this moment. Don't make him do anything for it. Don't make him have to do extra chores. Sit down with him and tell him that you're going to let him go play. But teach him in this moment about grace. I'm not going to lie. Everything in me rebelled against what God was telling me to do in that moment because I did not want to be a punk parent that backed out of the punishment that I had just given my child. I was like, no, he's going to learn. And again, I don't even remember what he did anymore. But we got home and I made him go to his room, and I had to psych myself up for this because I was like, okay, I told him what I was going to do. What is he going to think? Is he going to think that he can get away with anything at this point? Is my whole family going to just turn into rebellious chaos? What is about to happen? And I was working myself up, like, what am I going to say to him? So he knows I'm not playing around, but like also grace. So I went upstairs and sat down and I began to talk to him about what grace means. And I asked him, Asher, do you know what grace is? He sat there for a second. He thought, he's like, the thing that we say before we eat. Okay, no, that's not exactly what grace is. And I began to go on to explain it to him and let him go play, because I feel like you need to start learning about grace at a young age. I didn't know about grace until I was older, and I think it's still something that I'm trying to learn on a daily basis and kind of even work out of my system. But I think that God wanted in that moment for him to see a very practical example of what grace looks like. But I also feel like God wanted to show me what grace looks like when it's given. And I think sometimes we can have this understanding and this concept of grace that is completely inaccurate. And the definition of grace is actually the unmerited or the undeserved favor of God. It is the undeserved favor of God. And it means that God freely gives us eternal life completely apart from anything we are or anything that we do. This is, again, I said it earlier, completely counter to everything that we are taught growing up. We can sometimes have a hard time distinguishing between the things that we work for and grace. And oftentimes those two bleed together, which makes us receiving grace very tricky and very complicated when it doesn't have to be. At our church, we recite our creed every single Sunday, and I'm going to put it in the comments section so that maybe it's something that you read over yourself every day as a reminder of who you are, who God says you are. It is something that our kids recite in children's church, because we want this to be embedded in their hearts at a young age. But the creed is, I am loved by God. I cannot earn it. I cannot lose it. In Christ, I am forgiven and made brand new. I live with passion and purpose. I am empowered by the Spirit to be the church in the world and to live for the glory of God. I love in that creed, it says, I cannot earn it. I cannot lose it. What a beautiful reminder on a daily basis that what Jesus did on the cross, none of us deserved it. None of us can work hard enough for it. None of us can live a perfect life to deserve it, but it was given to us freely so that we could live the life that God designed us to have, so that we can walk in the authority and the power that we are supposed to have. And it was given to us through grace. We didn't deserve it. We didn't earn it. There's nothing we can do to get it other than receive it. And in Romans 5, chapter 6, it says, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. Though for a good person, someone might possibly dare die, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This is a huge mental barrier for us that come into the church, or those of us who have kind of begun our journey in our faith. And this was hard for me because I was always taught you work for what you have. I'm still a huge proponent for that. I think in the world, you work hard on your job, you you work hard for the things that you have. But when it came to grace, when it came to salvation, I had a really hard time overcoming this piece. I still to this day have to constantly remind myself, constantly be in prayer when I am doing something for the Lord. I have to look at my motives. Am I doing it to try and earn God's favor? Am I doing it to try and earn God's love? Am I doing it to try to earn God's acceptance? Do I feel guilty for something I did? Therefore, I feel like I have to pay God with acts of service to earn forgiveness. What is my motive behind what I'm doing? And far too often, we believe the lie that we have to work, like Rihanna's song, for God's grace. And that's not it at all. In Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 9, it says, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no man can boast." God sent Jesus here to earth. You hear my dog squeaker. Goodness, these dogs are a mess. I'm sorry. He sent Jesus here to die on a cross, to pay the price that we were meant to pay so that we could live a life free, so that we could live a life set apart, so that we could have a relationship with the creator of the universe. And there is nothing that we could do to earn it or to deserve it. But God, through his sovereignty, saw through eternity, saw you and saw me, knows everything that we are guilty of, knows everything that we are also going to do in the future. And he still sent his son to die for us because he loved us that much. And what I love about it is we can't take credit for it. We might try. We might try to pull out the Rolodex of our good works and say, but God, I prayed for 4 hours that one day, remember? But God, I lived a good life. But God, I tried making the right choices. But God, I give financially to the church. But God, and God is saying, you can't take credit for this. It is your job to merely receive the grace that I have given you and live with the authority and the power that I have left for you, and to be everything I have created you to be. And what the enemy does is he does a phenomenal job of messing with our minds to get us to believe that we have to work for our salvation, that we have to work for grace, that we have to work for forgiveness. Because if he can get us to work for things in a way that puts us in a place of bondage so that we are unable to live a life that is free. He wants us to live with our mindset wrapped around what it is that we can do, completely removing and minimizing what God wants to do in and through our lives. We get so self-centered and focused on us that we take our eyes off of God, the giver of grace in the first place. And again, this is completely counter to what we have been taught all of our lives, which is to work for what we have. Now, it does go on to say that there is works that God is predestined for us to do, but we do those things out of the abundance of what we already have in our hearts. We don't do it to earn something. We do it because it's an overflow of what's already in our heart. And grace is one of those foundational truths that we have to receive in order to live the lives that God has created and designed for us to live. I love that God took the time in that moment with my son to teach me what grace looks like when it's extended. And from my perspective, what it looks like when a child comes to you begging, not necessarily for forgiveness, but for grace, and what it looks like to give it. to a child. You love this kid, and there are moments when, yeah, they need to learn that they need to make the right choices, that there are consequences to decisions. But in that moment, God wanted to teach him a lesson about receiving grace and what that looks like, and to even be mindful of the decisions that he's going to make in the future. But it was cool that I got to take part in helping to kind of set the foundation and the framework for what grace looks like in his mind. Because just like Asher, he wanted to wash the car. He said, "I'm sorry," at least 3,000 times. He wanted to do all of these things to try and prove how sorry he was and that he wasn't going to do it again. And that's how we oftentimes will go to God. What can I do? What can I do? And God's like, you can do nothing. I already did it for you. Receive my grace. Receive salvation. You don't have to work so hard for it. You don't have to work for it at all. And this is a tricky thing that we have to let go of and learn how to receive. But also, I think on the flip side of that, how do we extend grace to those around us? There's even a story in the Bible where it talks about Jesus was talking about a parable of a slave whose debt, he was called before the king. He owed a debt to the king and he couldn't pay it. And he said, "Have mercy on me." And the debt was forgiven to the slave. But then the slave went to somebody else who owed them a debt and said, "You better pay me what you owe me," and beat this person and threatened to sell his children. And then the king got word that the person he forgave their debt had gone and threatened somebody else, was brought before the king, and he was called wicked for his approach. And oftentimes we forget the grace that was extended to us when we were a hot mess train wreck of a human being, and we don't extend the same type of grace to those around us who are in a situation that we had been in maybe years before and had come out on the other side. We forget sometimes how hard it was for us to make wise choices, how hard it was for us to do the right thing, how hard it was maybe for us to overcome an addiction. We forget what it was like to be them and to be in their shoes. We lose our compassion and we forget to extend grace to those around us. And may we not be the type of people who forget where we have come from. May we not forget the pit that God found us in, the pit that he pulled us out of, the grace that God extended to us. Because I don't know about you, I'm pretty open about my testimony and the mistakes that I've made and the decisions that I've made and the grace God has extended to me personally. I'm pretty honest and transparent about that, but there are some things that I haven't shared with anybody that I know that I am guilty of. I know that I've done, and God still knows about those things. God still sees those things, and God still forgave me of those things too. And you probably have things that nobody else knows about, that God forgave those things in you. And sometimes we can walk around with the mindset of being so holy, being so righteous, that we forget what it's like to be broken and to be lost. We kind of lose our empathy. We lose our compassion. We lose our sympathy for the broken world around us. And what would it look like if we were to live our lives out, not with shame, not with guilt, but with sympathy for the broken around us? What would it look like if we were to extend grace to those around us? Maybe within reason. I mean, we don't want to be a doormat. We don't want to be abused in any way, shape, or form, and, having boundaries. But what would it look like if for me personally, I mean, those of you who don't know my testimony, my husband and I, we got married really young. We were 20 when we got married, and I got pregnant when we were dating for about 6 months in, and we got married when we had been together for 8 months. We both dealt with infidelity when my husband came home from deployment, found out that there was a pornography addiction and that he had been unfaithful. And I became very bitter and very angry, and I became verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically abusive because I was so angry and I didn't know what to do with what was in my heart. I didn't know what to do with that pain. And so my husband, I mean, he is phenomenal. He went to counseling and he got help, and I didn't. And so out of spite, a couple years later, I was unfaithful as kind of a really immature way to pay him back for the pain that I felt. And we were separated for a while, and only by the grace of God are we still together. I wasn't going to church. I had no relationship with the Lord at that time. We did not have a support system. We didn't go to marriage counseling, which, by the way, I highly recommend going to marriage counseling. Hindsight, we totally should have done that. But only by the grace of God are we married still. Did we even make it through the first 3 years of our marriage? And here we are coming up on 15 years of marriage this year. And I have so much compassion for marriages who are in the same shoes that we were once in, and maybe walking down a path that we have walked down, feeling completely hopeless and broken. Like, I know that pain. I remember that pain. And who am I to look at couples or a husband or a wife that is feeling the same feelings that I once felt and saying, oh, you guys just need to get over it. Oh, you should have known better. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, they could have made a better choice. Dust yourself off, get over it. God is your strength. Yeah, God is your strength, but you are also still a human being with emotions. I never want to forget the grace that was extended to me. And I never want to hold the grace that was extended to me captive and not extend it to those around me. I want to be very open about my story and what God extended to me to show hope to other people in my shoes that it is possible to get to the other side. You can stay married after adultery. It is possible. It hurts like hell, but it is possible. It's hard work, but it is possible. So we need to be really good at receiving the grace of God. We need to be good about not trying to work for forgiveness, not trying to work for his mercy, not trying to work for his grace. We have to be really mindful of our motives when we are doing things, and allowing God to kind of weed out maybe the wrong theology that we think about when we are talking about grace. But we also have to be really good at extending grace to those around us. Do people deserve it? No, people are crazy. I mean, good grief. It's just humanity. I mean, people are broken. Why do we expect the unsaved and the broken world to act holy and righteous? I mean, that's just an unrealistic expectation. What would it look like, though, if we were to extend grace instead of criticism? What would it look like? What would our friendships look like? What would the workplace look like? Because the world is full of so many people who have a bazillion opinions on what you should do better, how you should have done that, why you're wrong. I mean, we'll get on the internet in a hot second and tell people our opinion about how they're living their lives and what they should do differently. Like, nobody asked us for our opinion. What if we extended grace? Maybe gave people the benefit of the doubt. Like, I feel like people would be so much less offended with life if we were to extend grace to those around us. I don't know. Those are just some things that I want to challenge you with. Do you have a hard time with the concept of receiving grace that you have not worked for? What were you taught growing up about salvation and about grace? Is it something that you had to work and strive to deserve? Because God knows our heart, and we all fall short of the glory of God every single day. None of us are ever going to be good enough to receive his grace. It's free and it's scandalous. That's, some people call it, the scandalous grace, because he gave it so freely. He sent his son to die for us, and we didn't have to do anything for it other than just receive it and walk in it. How do you extend grace? Are you good at that? Are you good at extending grace? Because I know it's something I have to work towards, because people get on my last nerve. But do you extend it well? What about those that are walking through a season that you personally have experience with, that you have come to the other side? Do you withhold your story? Do you withhold grace from them? Do you not extend compassion or mercy to those people because they should have known better, they should have made better choices? I think our lives in our circle would look a lot different if we were to extend grace to those around us. Let me know how it is that you approach grace. Is it something that you struggle with? And is this something that you need prayer for? Like, you're just having a really hard time with this concept, you can totally hit me up. I would love to pray for you. You can reach me on my website, rayma.com. Also follow me on social media. I'd love to hear from you guys. Share this with those in your world. Do you have girlfriends in your life that maybe need to hear this story, that they are working themselves to death to deserve grace, and they just need to hear, look, you can't work for it? Don't forget to maybe print off the creed. I'm going to attach that in the comment section. I hope that this encourages you guys, blesses you guys. I want to put the challenge out there. Extend grace to somebody this week. You decide what that looks like. But when you are faced with an opportunity to cast judgment or to throw a stone at somebody, stop and pause and ask yourself, what would extending grace in this moment look like, and how would it change the circumstance? And see what happens. Because I think God does that with us every single day. So I will catch you guys next week. I hope you have a phenomenal rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon.